Now, China has once again come to the aid of Pakistan by blocking a bid at the United Nations to designate Pakistan-based Lashkar-e-Taiba terrorist Sajjid Mir as a global terrorist. Remember, this motion was moved by the UN, and India sought blacklisting Sajjid Mir, who is wanted in connection with the 26/11 Mumbai terror attacks. This proposal by the US and India to designate Sajjid Mir as a global terrorist would result in his assets being frozen, and a travel ban would also be imposed on him. We also are getting to understand that India, in fact, termed this entire move by China as, quote-unquote, a petty geopolitical interest that China is currently looking into as opposed to a global interest. Remember, this is not the first time that China blocked the proposals of blacklisting terrorists. In fact, in September last year too, it was learned that China had put a hold on the proposal to designate Sajjid Mir at the UN. In fact, Beijing has now blocked this proposal entirely. Mir, remember, is one of India's most wanted terrorists and has a bounty of $5 million that is being placed on his head by the United States of America for his role in the 26/11 Mumbai terror attacks. Let me take this across to my colleague Abhishek Jhaus, joining us on the broadcast on this live stream. Abhishek, this becomes a very, very strategic move by China. How does one read it in the context of US and India, specifically US, considering Antony Blinken just had a meeting with Xi Jinping. He's just back, and after that meeting, the US president ended up calling Xi a traitor, a dictator.
Of course, the China-US confrontation on various levels are continued even in this geopolitical tension world. We have seen that happening, that this whole tension between USA and China started during the Trump's era. And even in the last 3-4 years, we have not seen any any effort by both the sides that has gone down well and that has tried to soothe the tension between the two sides. In fact, Secretary Blinken was supposed to travel way back in the month of February only to China. He and Janet Yellen, the US finance minister, but the decision was called, the decision was snapped because America found that few weather balloons that China said them weather balloons were trying to snoop around US military establishment, and the issue escalated diplomatically, and then finally Biden administration had to send fighter jets to shoot those balloons down, and Chinese side maintained that these were weather balloons. So since then to now, when Secretary Blinken trying to reach out to China, it was reported that Chinese side turned down the request from the USA side of having a negotiation or senior level dialogue many times until they agreed upon Secretary Blinken's visit to China. So clearly US was also very keen to having engagement with China. It doesn't want to have any confrontation with China, and China has sort of realized this fact that it is now emerging at a world stage in terms of economic power, in terms of its strategic power, in terms of a defense power, especially in the wake of Russia-Ukraine conflict. So, having said that, another part of the story would be why India and US engagement, the closer engagement, is also irking China, because China thinks that in Asia, if any country can challenge Chinese hegemony or Chinese supremacy, it could be only India. With this 1.4 billion population and about $4 trillion economy, and soon inching towards $5 trillion economy, which India is hoping to reach in the next 3 to 4 years. Also, European countries, USA, they are trying to move away manufacturing bases from China to India. Remember why China is currently the biggest power? Because in the last 2 decades, China has invested in its manufacturing capability and invited globally all the countries and companies to come there and build. This is what India has also started to do, and maybe it will bear fruit in decades from now. But China has clearly sensed the Indian ambition, and this is why it's trying to arm twist India by doing this technical holes or irritating it diplomatically at a level where India and US are trying to pitch for a concerted fight against terrorism at a global stage. But China, in the name of technical hole, are trying to seek more clarification, more evidences, more time, and delaying hold on individuals and organizations which have a proven track record of being involved in heinous activities of terrorism, where in Mumbai, terrorist activity, especially where people from many nationalities were killed, and it has been established. There are video and audio clips where Sajjid Mir can be easily heard, asking terrorists on the ground to do this, do that, shoot people down, do indiscriminate firing. But despite that, it doesn't matter to China. It has to continue with its own agenda, and that is to subdue Indian influence at the global stage.
Also, Abhishek, while you say that and while Prime Minister Narendra Modi is visiting the United States of America, do you think, since security is also part of the deal that is going to be spoken about, do you think this also will find a mention when it is about his conversation with US President Joe Biden?
See, India and USA are engaging at a level where, I mean, we cannot say that any particular area is not being discussed. From Russia-Ukraine war to Taiwan Strait crisis to the issue of terrorism, and emerging critical technology transfer and sharing intelligence inputs on issues. So everything is going to be discussed between the leaders over the several meetings that they are going to have over the 3 days period that Prime Minister will be in Washington. And terrorism will, of course, be an issue. And if a global fight has to be with all countries who have been, victim of terrorism, including China, because China also claims that it has been a victim of terrorism, but then it shies away from accepting the fact that there are terrorists, international terrorists, which needs to be called out and who needs to be put into the prohibitory list. This is what India has said, that a terrorist is a terrorist. An act of terrorism has to be an act of terrorism. There cannot be no, smoke screening of a particular good terrorism or a bad terrorism. So if a person has been involved in any extremist ideology or violence, that needs to be called out. But the Chinese definition may be different, or they are trying to act different to save the face of Pakistan, their close ally, their strategic ally against India. And China also sees India increasingly getting towards USA camp, and the whole Indo-Pacific strategy that India, USA, Australia and Japan are trying to create is going to contain the dominance of China in that region. So probably China is also trying to flex its muscle on the diplomatic stage, where India doesn't have that much of weight right now because of not being a permanent or temporary member of United Nations Security Council. It has to rely heavily upon its peers across world to push for its agenda.